The wind howled across the barren valley, carrying with it the scent of snow and sagebrush. In the distance, jagged mountains rose like the spines of some ancient beast, their peaks lost in swirling clouds. Among these desolate lands, a boy wandered, a boy with no home, no family, and no name to call his own. People in the nearby frontier towns whispered of him, calling him a ghost of the mountains. Some said he had been abandoned as a child. Others claimed he ran from a past too painful to remember. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear: he survived where others would perish. His clothes were tattered, boots worn thin, and his face carried the dust of countless days under the sun and snow. Despite his youth, there was a certain sharpness in his Isa, vigilance born from necessity. Every rustle of a bush, every shadow cast by the trees, was a potential threat, and he had learned to move quietly, unseen, unheard. Yet, for all his solitude, there was a quiet kindness within him, a spark that refused to be extinguished by the harsh world around him. On this particular morning, he found himself at the edge of a narrow ravine, the sun just breaking over the peaks, painting the rocks in fiery gold. He crouched beside a small stream, drinking the icy water, when a faint cry echoed through the valley. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks on him, but then he heard it again, a clear, human voice, trembling and fearful. Curiosity and caution warred within him, but his instinct to help won. Following the sound, he moved carefully over rocks and fallen branches until he came upon a girl. She was young, no older than 12 or 13, her dark hair tangled, and her clothes thin against the morning chill. Her eyes, wide with fear, were fixed on the steep mountains looming behind her. "Are you lost?" the boy asked softly, stepping closer. The girl nodded, clutching a small bundle to her chest. I need to get across the mountains," she whispered. "My village. They need me. I must hurry." He studied her for a long moment. Crossing the mountains was no small feat. Many seasoned men had tried and failed. Avalanches, wolves, sudden storms, any of these could end a life in an instant. Yet, something in her determination struck him. She wasn't just running, she was on a mission, carrying the weight of her people on her small shoulders. Without another word, he offered his hand. "I'll help you," he said. Not because he sought reward, or recognition, or safety. He didn't expect any of those things. He helped because it was the right thing to do, because for the first time in years, he felt a connection that went beyond himself. Together, they began their journey along the rocky path that wound into the mountains. Every step was a test, every loose stone a potential trap. The boy led the way, scanning the cliffs and ledges for danger. The girl followed, her trust in him growing with each careful step. As they climbed higher, the valley below disappeared into mist, and the sun rose fully, casting a brilliant light over the world, as if blessing their path. But the mountains were unforgiving. The wind whipped around them, biting and relentless, and the snow began to fall. Soft at first, then heavier, covering tracks and hiding hazards. Still, they pressed on, guided by necessity, courage, and an unspoken bond that began to form in the shared struggle for the boy. This was a new kind of journey, not just through the wilderness, but into something he had long forgotten: hope, purpose, and the possibility of making a difference. The mountains rose higher with every step, their jagged peaks piercing the sky like frozen daggers. Snow blanketed the rocky paths, turning each step into a careful negotiation with the earth. The boy led the way, his keen eyes scanning for loose stones, hidden crevasses, and signs of danger. The girl followed closely, shivering beneath her thin cloak, clutching her small bundle as if it were the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. The journey was grueling. The wind cut through their clothes like knives, and the temperature dropped so suddenly it made their breath mist in the frigid air. At times, the boy had to help the girl across narrow ledges, his hands gripping hers firmly as they balanced above sheer drops. One misstep could mean certain death, but neither hesitated. Their determination burned brighter than the bitter cold as they climbed higher. The landscape became a jagged maze of rocks and ice. The boy taught the girl how to read the terrain, how to sense avalanches before they happened, and how to move quietly to avoid attracting predators. Wolves prowled the mountains, their distant howls echoing like ghostly warnings. Once, a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the shadows, and the boy instinctively placed himself between the girl and the predator. The wolves lingered a moment, then melted back into the darkness, as if recognizing the boy's courage. During a rare moment of rest, the girl finally spoke, her voice trembling. "My village, they are in danger," she said. "Some of our people have been taken by outlaws. I must reach them. I must warn them." Her eyes shone with fear and resolve, and the boy felt a chill deeper than the snow against his skin. This was no ordinary journey. This was a mission that could save lives. Night fell, and the mountains transformed into a cold, silver wilderness under the light of the moon. They found shelter beneath an overhang, using rocks to shield themselves from the wind. The boy built a small fire, the flames licking the darkness, giving them warmth and a sense of safety. Around the fire, they shared stories to pass the time. The girl spoke of her family, her tribe, and the traditions she cherished. The boy, usually silent, found himself sharing fragments of his past childhood spent wandering, surviving, and learning the harsh lessons of solitude. The bond between them grew. The girl's courage inspired him, and his strength gave her hope. They were no longer just a boy and a girl struggling to survive. They were a team, bound by circumstance and choice, each protecting the other against the merciless mountains. The next morning, the storm came. Snow fell in thick sheets, visibility disappearing within seconds. The path became treacherous, and the boy's instincts were tested like never before. He guided the girl slowly, carefully checking every step, listening to the sounds of the shifting snow, predicting the subtle shifts that could trigger an avalanche. Several times they had to stop, huddled together for warmth, hearts pounding with fear and determination. Through sheer perseverance, skill, and courage, they pressed onward. Every mile climbed was a victory. Every crevasse crossed a triumph over nature's wrath. By the end of the day, the storm began to ease, revealing a distant ridge bathed in the soft glow of sunset. Relief and exhaustion mingled in equal measure, but the boy and girl knew that the hardest trials still awaited them. The mountains were not yet conquered, and the dangers of the journey were far from over. Yet, in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They were no longer strangers. They were companions, allies, and together they would face whatever the Old West had in store. The mountains were quiet, too quiet, as if holding their breath. The boy and the girl had been climbing for hours. The the snow crunching beneath their boots, their breaths heavy in the icy air. They thought the storm had passed, leaving only the bitter wind and the whispering peaks. But danger often hides in silence, and the mountains were about to remind them of that. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the valley, a sound like breaking wood. The boy froze, every muscle tensing, eyes darting to the ridges above. From behind a cluster of rocks, a group of outlaws emerged, their faces hardened by greed and cruelty. They were armed, their rifles glinting in the fading sunlight. The boy knew immediately. They were after something valuable. Perhaps the girl, perhaps her mission, perhaps both. "Run," he hissed, grabbing her arm. The girl didn't hesitate. Instinct and training had taught her to trust him completely. Together, they sprinted across the treacherous terrain, leaping over frozen streams and jagged rocks, the snow making every step unpredictable. Bullets whizzed past them, splintering ice and stone, and the boy felt a cold surge of adrenaline. Every decision now could mean life or death. As they climbed a narrow ledge, the girl stumbled. The boy lunged, catching her before she fell into a deep crevasse. Heart pounding, he pulled her to safety. "You have to trust me," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. She nodded, gripping his hand tightly. In that moment, they were not just fleeing, they were fighting for each other. Using his knowledge of the mountains, the boy led them through a hidden path, a route few knew existed. They ducked behind boulders, scaled steep inclines, and crept silently, forcing the outlaws to lose track. The girl began to mimic his movements, learning quickly, her fear transforming into courage. She wasn't helpless. She was becoming a survivor, a partner in this perilous dance. Eventually, they reached a small overhang where the outlaws could not follow. The boy lit a small fire, careful not to reveal their position. The girl sat close, shivering, her eyes reflecting both fear and awe. I've never met anyone like you," she whispered. "Someone who helps without asking for anything." He looked at her, the firelight dancing on his tired face. "You have a mission," he said softly. "I just want to make sure you get there." There was a quiet honor in those words, code he had lived by all his life, surviving on courage, skill, and integrity. As night fell, they shared stories. The girl spoke of her tribe, the traditions and struggles, and the threat posed by the outlaws. The boy, usually silent and wary, spoke of his past, the streets, the mountains, the loneliness that had shaped him. In sharing their histories, an unspoken bond grew, stronger than any fear or danger. They were no longer a boy and a girl navigating the wilderness. They were allies, bound by trust, courage, and a shared purpose. Before sleep claimed them, the boy kept watch, eyes scanning the darkness. Somewhere out there, the outlaws lurked, waiting for a mistake. But he wasn't afraid, not entirely. With the girl by his side, and the mountains around them, he felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. The bond they had forged in the face of danger was stronger than the fear that tried to creep into their hearts. And as the wind whispered through the peaks, carrying their determination into the night, the boy knew one thing. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The first rays of dawn painted the mountains in shades of gold and rose, softening the harsh edges of the snow-covered peaks. The boy and the girl had spent a long, harrowing night hiding from the outlaws, and exhaustion weighed heavily on them. Every muscle ached, Every step was a struggle. Yet the thought of safety, of reaching her village, gave them the strength to move forward. The path ahead was steep, carved into the side of a cliff, with sheer drops on one side and frozen rocks on the other. One wrong move could send them tumbling into the valley below. But the boy's experience in these unforgiving mountains guided them steadily. He held her hand as they traversed narrow ledges, whispering encouragement when fear threatened to overwhelm her. The girl, in turn, trusted him completely, following his lead with silent determination as they climbed. The snow began to thin, revealing a distant ridge bathed in the warm glow of the morning sun. Beyond it lay a valley dotted with small tipis and smoke, curling from cooking fires, a village hidden in the folds of the mountains. Relief surged through the girl, her pace quickening despite the weariness in her legs. She knew she was almost home. The boy, watching her reaction, felt a rare warmth in his chest. For years, he had wandered alone, unseen and forgotten by the world. But here, he saw the meaning of his journey, not just survival, but purpose. Helping her wasn't just about guiding someone across mountains. It was about making a difference, leaving a mark in a world that had long ignored him. As they descended into the valley, villagers began to notice their approach. A few children paused in their morning chores, staring with wide eyes at the boy and the girl emerging from the snow. Elders stepped out of their homes, squinting against the sun, curiosity etched on their faces. The girl ran ahead, calling out greetings and explaining that she had returned with help. The boy followed at a slower pace, unsure how he would be received. Finally, they reached the heart of the village. The girl's family rushed forward, embracing her tightly, tears mingling with the snow on their faces. Gratitude and relief radiated from them, yet the boy remained in the background, quietly observing. He didn't expect thanks. His reward was the knowledge that she had made it safely. Still, there was a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years, a fleeting but precious connection to a community. The elders approached him cautiously, their expressions a mix of suspicion and curiosity. The boy straightened, offering a small nod. "I helped her cross the mountains," he said simply. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded with anticipation. They studied him in silence, then exchanged glances, whispering among themselves. The girl stepped forward, taking his hand and guiding him closer to the circle of elders. "He saved me," she said firmly, "and he protected me from danger. He is our friend." The words carried weight, and the elders' eyes softened. Recognition and gratitude replacing suspicion. For the first time in a long while, the boy felt the warmth of acceptance. The mountains had tested him, pushed him to his limits, and forged him into someone capable of extraordinary courage. And now, standing at the edge of the village, he realized that his journey filled with snow, danger, and fear had led him to a place where he was needed and appreciated. The girl's family offered him food, warm clothing, and a place to rest. But more importantly, they offered respect and friendship. He had crossed the mountains not for glory, but for honor, and that honor was now reflected in the grateful eyes of the people he had saved. As night fell over the valley, the boy finally allowed himself to relax, knowing the worst of the journey was behind them. But deep in the mountains, shadows of danger still lingered. Unknown to him, the gratitude of the village would soon manifest in a way he could never have imagined. The morning sun broke over the mountains, spilling golden light across the village. Birds chirped in the crisp air. Smoke rose gently from the tipis, and for the first time in days, the boy felt a sense of calm. He had helped the girl reach safety, ensured her village was warned of danger, and survived the unforgiving journey. Now he thought he could rest, but tranquility in the Old West is often fleeting. A distant sound, at first faint, grew louder, rhythmic pounding that echoed off the cliffs and through the valley. Horses' hooves. Yes, and more than a few. The boy squinted toward the horizon and saw them, 30 warriors, mounted and formidable, riding toward the village with purpose. Their leader, a tall figure in traditional regalia, raised an arm in greeting, signaling they came with respect, not threat. The boy's heart raced. He had expected gratitude in private, a quiet nod of thanks from the girl's family. But this was extraordinary. 30 warriors had come across the mountains to honor him. The realization washed over him like a warm tide. He had been recognized, not for wealth or fame, but for courage, honor, and selflessness. The warriors dismounted, boots crunching in the snow. The girl ran forward, her face alight with joy. "He saved me," she shouted. "He protected me from danger. Without him, we would have lost everything." Her words carried across the valley, reaching the ears of the approaching warriors. The leader stepped forward, his expression solemn yet kind. "We have heard of your bravery," he said, addressing the boy directly. "You crossed the mountains, risked your life, and protected one of our own. For that, you have our respect and gratitude." The boy felt a lump rise in his throat. He was not used to praise, not used to acknowledgement. He opened his mouth, unsure what to say, but the words felt unnecessary. Actions, after all, had spoken louder than any words ever could. The warriors offered him gifts, a finely crafted knife, a warm cloak woven from the village's finest materials, and a small pouch of coins. But beyond material rewards, it was the recognition itself, the acknowledgement of his courage that touched him most deeply. For years, he had wandered the wilderness alone, invisible to the world. Now he stood at the center of gratitude, honored by those he had never known until a few days before. The girl hugged him tightly, whispering thanks that carried the weight of life and death. "You saved me," she said simply, "and because of you, our people are safe. You are one of us now." Tears pricked the boy's eyes. He had never known belonging, never known a community that accepted him, let alone honored him. The mountains had tested him. The storms had tried to break him, and yet he had endured. And now, in the warm light of the valley, with the girl and her people surrounding him, he understood something profound. Courage and kindness are never wasted. They ripple outward, touching lives in ways one can never predict. The villagers and warriors celebrated together, laughter and music mingling with the crisp mountain air. The boy, usually silent and watchful, found himself smiling freely, his heart unburdened for the first time in years. He had faced the harshness of the Old West, the dangers of the wilderness, and the cruelty of men, and he had emerged not only alive but honored as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the valley. The boy realized something he had never thought possible. He belonged not to a town, not to a street, not to a mountain, but to a community that valued bravery, honor, and heart. And in that realization, he finally felt at peace.